All right, are you guys ready to meet your keynote speaker? I'm gonna need it to get 10x that, okay? Are you ready to meet your keynote speaker? Thank you. This guy is the former Secretary of Energy from Uruguay, and he led the energy transition to 99% renewable energy. That's so good. Give it up for that. You wish you had 99% renewable energy. So this guy is gonna talk about how he did it and maybe give you guys some pointers. Give it up real big for Ramón Méndez Galain, everybody.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm so grateful for being here today to share what happened in my country, which is also part of my personal story. So in fact, what I'm going to share with you today, in this incredible place with these incredible people, I'm really loving being here today. What I want to say is, like a Shakespeare piece. I will present it in 5 different acts. And the third act, in fact, took place about, it took place about 40 years ago in France, when I was at 20 years old, science student there in France. And one day, in a flea market in Paris, I saw a little frame with this sentence. And this can be translated in English as, "He who lives without craziness is not as wise as he seems." I loved it. Of course, I was 20 years old. And I immediately bought it and bring it home. And I didn't know at that time how the importance of this little frame, of this sentence, has taken for my whole life, and even for what happened in my country. Eventually, I became a scientist, a particle physicist, and my attitude in work was more closely to looking for wisdom rather than craziness. But even though this little frame was always in a very prominent place in all the houses I have the chance to live in 6 different countries since following my professional career. So now, let's go to second act. And let's go 20 years in the future, and we are now in the first decade of this century in my country, Uruguay. Uruguay is between Argentina and Brazil in South America. We have wonderful natural resources, both for leisure and for production. And in fact, Uruguay is the smallest country, both in size and in population, only 3 million inhabitants. But in fact, we are very interesting figures, as for example, having the highest GDP per capita of the whole Latin American and Caribbean region, or having the lowest poverty share of the whole region, and this is because mainly we have a very stable democracy, very stable country, very stable economy. In fact, according to different international indicators, together with Canada, we are the only 2 countries in the whole Americas to be what is called a full democracy. But you know, some 15 years ago, in fact, we were having very strong difficulties in the energy sector. The economy was growing at extraordinary rates, and poverty was decreasing to as low as 8%. And this was fantastic, of course, but the problem is that energy demand was growing very rapidly. And this was a problem because Uruguay is a country with no proven reserve of any kind of fossil fuels. So we have to import everything. We don't use coal, but we have to import natural gas and oil in order for our domestic demand. And on top of that, in the 20th century, we have already used our large rivers to install hydropower plants. And on top of that, our 2 big neighbors were having their own difficulties to cope with the domestic demand of energy. So we're really in big problems. And in fact, we're becoming to be more and more dependent on imported fossil fuels with a tremendous skyrocketing prices of the energy in general, and we're beginning to have blackouts in the power sector. So we're really needing to think on something completely different. We're really needing to think out of the box. And at that time, I was a university professor in my country, in Uruguay, and as a professor, I had the need to try to contribute to the discussion. And in fact, I had no experience in energy at that time, but in fact, what we scientists are trained for is to face difficult questions and try to find original answers. So this is exactly what I needed to do. So I began to study the energy issue, and immediately understood that it was not just technologies or sources or economics. This was also other dimensions that were involved in the energy sector, as for example, environmental dimension, climate ones, of course, but also social dimensions, geopolitical dimensions, cultural dimensions, and even ethical dimensions. All of this has to be taken into account when you define what an energy system should be. And it was rapidly clear for me that, at least in our case, the best solution were renewable sources. It was the best. It was a holistic solution for the whole difficulties we had because, first of all, renewables are domestic resources. We don't have to import anything. It's just a lot of sovereignty and for a small economy, this is much more important. But they're also, by definition, inexhaustible and abundant all over the world. We don't have particularly better, good wind or solar or whatever, but this is an average, and this is already enough. And also, renewables that doesn't need us to purchase for a fuel dependent on different prices. It's just for free. You just have to pay for the technology in order to take it from nature for free. And of course, renewables has a lot of possibilities as it is distributed generation. So for example, in order to cope, to have more energy access to the population, there are better technologies in order to do that. And last but not least, of course, renewables help to stop climate change. Because even consider the whole life cycle of the whole technology is the lowest greenhouse gas emission that we can have. This was very clear, but in fact, there were two main challenges. The first challenge was a technical one. Solar and wind, they are variable sources. So how could we manage that? Was it possible, which is the highest share of those better sources that we can have in the mix, in particular in the power sector? What is the share one that we can really manage? And the second question related to this is, can we do this decreasing cost? Can we do it just having positive impacts to our economy, not trying to subsidize or whatever, which is completely, kind of follow for a long time? So with this in mind, I wrote a proposal. It was somehow crazy proposal in order to try to figure out how to go to as close as possible 100% in our grid. And in fact, when I wrote that, one day, I received a phone call. I was working in my office at the university, and on the other side of the line, it was my president, the president of my country. And he has read that, and he wanted me to implement this transformation of the system and being his Secretary of Energy. It was completely a crazy idea. But the point is that I did something even more crazier. I accepted. And I had a chance during 2 consecutive administrations, I served 2 presidents as Secretary of Energy, to lead a tremendous transition in my country. So let's end Act 2, and then let's come to Act 3, 15 years afterwards. What is going right now together, at least still in my country? These are the results. So first result, yes, we succeeded to make the system, at least the power system, working with 99% of renewable sources in the grid. And this is a huge number. Already 50% was important because it was just hydropower. But this is very important because if you compare to average, even in that moment, which was only 24% worldwide, and this 24% worldwide is almost, at that time, was almost 18% just hydropower. The interesting thing in our case is that we have a combination of different renewable sources. Wind alone can be as high as 40% of the total electricity in the grid in regular years. But also, Uruguay is a country with a lot of agro-industry, agro-industry production. So we have a lot of waste, biomass waste with a lot of potential energy content. So nowadays, about 50% of the total electricity is obtained from biomass waste that are stopped to be an environmental liability, and now they are an energy asset. But perhaps also another very particular issue of the Uruguayan case is that we had succeeded to that without a single battery, water pumping, or any kind of energy storage. what we succeeded to do through doing a completely out-of-the-box thing is just because of the complementarity of different renewable sources in order to have this high percentage of participation of renewable sources. So at this point, we won, okay? The first challenge was already there. Yes, it was possible to manage a system with almost 100% of renewable sources. So what happened about cost? The other question. And I like to say that the costs, in fact, were negative because, in fact, we decreased by a factor of 2 the cost of producing electricity thanks to renewables. Because nowadays, this is not just dreaming. Nowadays, this is the real proof. Nowadays, renewables are the cheapest option that we can have. It's much cheaper than any kind of fossil fuel, nuclear, or whatever you want to put in the grid. But much more important than the cost decrease, the average cost decrease, is cost stability. Because as we are no longer dependent on those crazy fluctuations of energy commodity prices, because we don't depend on geopolitical events, war, or whatever can happen, so I can tell you which is the price of the electricity tomorrow, day after tomorrow, in a week, in a month, in a year, in 5 years, because it's completely stabilized. And this is crucial. And we succeeded to do that because, in fact, we got about $6 billion investment in a few years. The whole transition took no more than 5 years, nothing more than that. And in 5 years, we got $6 billion. $6 billion perhaps is not that much for you, but for a small country, for a small economy, 12% of the total GDP of the country. Just to have an idea, do you know how much is 12% of United States GDP? I can tell you, it's about more than $3 trillion. So imagine what happened in an economy when you have an input just for one industry, for just one sector, which is about 12% of GDP. We had developed new industrial capacity, entrepreneurial capacities, new knowledge, and 50,000 new jobs. Perhaps this is not that much for you, but for a country with 3 million inhabitants, this is about 3% of the total labor force of the country. Once again, if I went to make a comparison with your country, this is about creating 4 to 5 million new jobs. So this industry has a tremendous positive impact to our economy. And not only that, because nowadays, instead of importing renewable energy from our neighbors at extraordinarily high prices, we are exporting energy surpluses. And this is about 1% of the GDP of the country, which is coming just from exports of electricity. Our national utility is the corporate with highest share of exports of the whole country. More than wool, more than meat, more than dairies. This is just exporting energy surpluses of our grid, of our mix. And last but not least, this has also a tremendous positive impact on the social issue because we have defined, according to our policy, that the energy policy is a tool in order to have more inclusion in the country, and is a tool in order to decrease poverty and to increase the energy access. In Uruguay, energy access is considered a human right in the same way as access to education or access to health is a human right. Access to energy is also a human right. And so what we got is about almost 100% electrification of the whole country thanks to a complementarity of different technologies, on-grid and off-grid solutions. And nowadays, only about 1,000 houses lost in the middle of nowhere in the countryside, they're still lacking access to electricity. And there is one word I haven't mentioned so far when speaking in these results of what happened in Uruguay. Then this word is climate. Climate is very important for me. I have been the Secretary of Climate Change of my country. Afterwards, I've been the chief negotiator of the Paris Agreement, representing my country. But so far, everything I have told you is independently of climate. Everything that is shown is that renewables today are the best for our own interest, no matter the contribution to stop climate change. And by the way, our contribution, of course, are crucial because either you measure them per capita or per kilowatt hour, our emissions are 40 times smaller than the world average. So yes, renewables also can contribute to decrease climate change. So what I'm telling you today is that yes, We have proved, and this has been working for the last 10 years, that the power system can work almost 100% renewable with a like share of variable sources. And yes, we have also proved that the renewable-based economy is ready to deliver. Independently of climate change, even if climate change didn't exist, today, the renewables delivers the cheapest option, the stabilized cost, they produce millions of jobs, they have a tremendous positive impact, and the new economy is ready to go. And of course, it can help to stop climate change. The interesting point is I don't have time, I just have time today to speak about grids and power, but in fact, this transition took place during the whole system. I mean, 80%, just to have some small figures, 80% of our industries, 80% of the energy consumed by our industry sector is renewable. The total industry, the total heat for industrial purpose, for example, and heating houses, heating offices, it's mainly based on renewables. The EV's penetration is multiplied by a factor of 4 every year. I like to say that I am a decarbonized person because I'm both at home and in office, I'm using 99% renewable electricity. I heat my office, I'm at home with heat pumps using 95% renewable electricity, 99% renewable electricity. I drive a EV, which I charges for only $4, and this allowed me to run for 500 kilometers. Of course, I don't tell anyone, but when I'm taking planes to go to these places, I'm lost this possibility of having but don't tell anyone. So this ends the third act. And let's go to the fourth act, which is not just one country, but the whole world. And of course, the question is that you are asking yourself, for sure, is this replicable as well? Isn't this that because there's a particular country, a small country, believe me, being a small country of the global south, everything is much more difficult. So this is not the answer. This is not because we have wonderful wind or solar, we have average wind and solar. This is not because we have hydro. Yes, we have hydro, it's important, but this is not the reason. So what are the real key reasons for this success story? And in fact, there are 3 main pillars that I would like to share with you. And these 3 main pillars, in principle, they can be replicated as well. The first one is that we defined a long-term policy that was backed by the entire Uruguayan political policy. All countries represent, all parties represented in parliament has approved this policy because we understood that this was the best for our constituencies. We understood and highlighted the benefits of the transition. And that's why it was very simple to get an agreement. It is crucial. And I'm the vivid example of that because I've been the Secretary of Energy of 2 consecutive governments. And in fact, during the last 20 years, we went from left government to right government, then right to left. And during 5 consecutive governments, this policy was in place. Continuity is crucial when we are going to long-term transition because we are not just changing the fuel, we are redefining the system, which is a little more complicated. Second, even if we decide to go all together in this direction, we have to be together. There can be winners and losers, and we have to make as less losers as possible. We have to take losers to convert them in winners, as all of us. So working the governance when you are changing something important in a disruptive way, governance is crucial. So adaptive governance means that we have to develop learning curves all the time, correcting, mistaking both governments and private sector, working hand with hand, government and private sector, with academy, with all stakeholders in the country, because when you have to do things out of the box, we need all the understanding of all the society. And third, and perhaps the most important, is that things do not happen spontaneously. It doesn't just need to be all together go in this direction. We have to create conditions for things to happen. So building a fully transformative ecosystem, a disruptive one, an innovative one, was crucial because our system has been bent according to the characteristic of fossil fuels. That's fine, because they were the best till some decades ago. But this tremendous bias the system has today has to be changed in order to allow renewables to compete in equal footings with renewables. So we have to deeply innovate. Innovation was the most important word of everything we did. We have to innovate, first of all, from the technical issues. The way we plan the system is completely different than the traditional way. The way we operate the system is completely different. Just to give you a few examples, this is what 1 week, I mean, yellow is sun, so it's 6 days there, and this is how we provide the electricity, in this case, needed in the country. And what we can see is that in Uruguay, base load is not nuclear power, it's not coal power, it's not combined cycle. Base load is wind and energy and biomass. And this is because the total installed capacity of wind plus energy is equal to the total demand, the peak demand of the country. So this means that in many moments, and this week happened 5 times, in many moments when there is enough wind and sun, 100% of electricity is just wind and sun, plus biomass. And we don't use water in this moment. Water is only following the variability of wind and solar. So there are completely different rows of all technologies. And at the end of the day, as an insurance policy, yes, we still have fossil fuel power plants. But these fossil fuel power plants are flexible power plants in order to follow the variability when all the rest fails. Hopefully, in our case, we need that only 1 to 3% of the year in a very dry year, when sometimes we need to use a little bit more of fossil fuels. But we also had to innovate in other issues. The first thing was to try to understand that variability of wind and solar can be manageable. I mean, human engineering has succeeded to put a man in the moon more than 50 years ago, and there's still people trying to say that it is not possible to manage variability of wind and solar. Please, if you have some doubt, take a plane, go to Uruguay, and we'll see how it works. But it works. But you also have to innovate in other things. For example, we need to innovate in the market design. We need a completely different market design. Renewables do not depend on the cost of a fuel. Renewable is just a financial business, and financial businesses are completely different than traditional energy business. So we have to go from a traditional short-term energy market to a long-term capacity market which has nothing to do, in order to decrease risk perception and decrease the cost of capital. And for that, we need to have a holistic planning of the system. And from this holistic planning, we define which is the best complementarity of sources in order for each of them to express all the needs of the system to have this, at the same time, the lowest cost and resource adequacy. And from that, we had bidding processes in which emerged long-term PPA contracts. So let's go to the last part, to the 5th act of this presentation, of this story. And for this 5th part, this last 2 minutes, it's taken place here and now, today, here with you. And the question is for you, what are the main takeaways of this story? Many of you can say, for example, that in fact, the main takeaway is that, yes, we have succeeded, we have proved in the world that the power system can work almost exclusively thanks to the complementarity of human renewable sources. And this is already something great. Most of you will say, on the contrary, that the most important point of this story is that we have succeeded to prove that the renewable-based economy is ready to deliver. We have already a new economy here, which is better, much better than the traditional one. Lower cost, stabilized cost, much more job creation, much more stability, and of course, stopping climate change. And this will be perhaps other conclusion for others of you. Yes, now we have a tool to really stop climate change. We have no more excuses. We don't have to have goals 2050, 2040, not even 2030. We can do it now. But my personal takeaway is not related to this. My personal takeaway has to do with what happened 40 years ago in Paris when I was a 20 years old young student. I finally understood what that sentence meant to me and also the consequences to my country. And the answer, I got it when about a couple of years ago, a student of mine in university told me, Ramon, you know what happened? At the end of the day, what we proved, in fact, is that not all crazy ideas are great ideas. But for sure, all great ideas are crazy ideas. So my point for you today, and for me, and for all of us, is that in fact, every morning when I wake up, every morning when I come to my office, what I should think is, what is the crazy idea that I have to have today in order to make it germinate, if possible, to a great idea? But for that, for sure, we have to be brave enough in order to do crazy things. And this is not the 20-year-old guy which is talking to you. It's my life experience. So thank you very much.
Give it up big for Ramón Méndez Galain, everybody. Great job. And Ramón has generously given us a couple of minutes for questions and answers. So we're going to do some Q&A. We got mics running out here. So we're going to, you want to stand or you want to take, so what do you want to do?
We can sit.
We got a couple microphones running around. So if you got a question, raise your hand, flag down one of the mic. I got a question right over here. Fire away.
Hi, yeah. Thanks for being here. That was a great presentation. I just had a quick question. What's the source of your biofuel, and is it sustainable? Is that something you can continue to do into the future? And then is there any, since it's still sort of a emissions producing, is there some plan to maybe move off of that onto something else, or is that just part of the permanent sort of plan for it?
No, in fact, biomass, not biofuels, it's biomass. They're just waste from the industry. For example, it's rice husk, or bagasse from sugarcane engines, or black liquor from pulp mills. So they're just, I will say, just former environmental liability which are not using. So they're absolutely, non-stop. I mean, you can have it forever. They're just waste from our industry. And yes, there are the possibility of still. Our emissions are about the total renewable energy in the total primary mix of the country is about 65%, considering everything. Okay, everything we consume as an energy, 65%. Just for comparison, the world average is 5% of modern renewables. Okay, so we are very close to decarbonizing the whole energy mix, but we still have 35% to go. And this has to do mainly with the transport sector. This is where we have to make the most important effort. And so even if we are multiplying the participation of EVs, we're still far from the final.
Great question, thank you. Right over here.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Menendez, for your crazy ideas. Sawyer from the CU Boulder MENV department. The United States has a separate electricity grids that serves as a barrier for interconnection. How has Uruguay shared its grid enhancements with its neighbors? Can you shed any light on the neighboring countries, in your experience, how they work together on grid infrastructure? And maybe draw any parallels between maybe stuff that the United States is doing versus Uruguay. Thank you.
Well, green interconnection is crucial. I mean, but we don't have to forget that electricity is not more than 20–25% of the total energy that we consume as countries. But the grid is crucial, and the electrification of the energy demand is also something which is going to grow very rapidly all over the world. And for that, interconnection is crucial. In our case, we are deeply interconnected with our neighbors. We used to be very highly interconnected with one of the neighbors, Argentina, and not as high with Brazil. But it was a difficulty because if we're expecting to have renewable energy surpluses with only one buyer, this is not good. We needed two off-takers in order to compete within them. So we paid for the interconnection, strong interconnection with Brazil, and now we have two possible off-takers. That's why we are getting these so interesting export incomes for exports. But for sure, energy integration is everything. In the United States, you have a very interesting interaction made in the East with Canada, not that much with Mexico. But the big problem is the national interconnection, because as we're seeing today, there are still a lot of different subsystems in the national system. And this, when you are going to have the complementarity of energies that we need for a fully renewable system, interconnection is everything. Because you can have wind in some region and not in the other one, and sun in some region, not in the other one, and water in one region, not the other one. So the complementarity is crucial, and for that, interconnections are something we need to read. Grids are crucial for this transition.
Great question over there. That was excellent. We got one over here, one right there. Yep, fire away.
Hello, muchas gracias por su presentación. Me encantó. You mentioned that one of the key points for the success of Uruguay is the long-term, strong political agreement. I would argue that that's something that we don't have common ground on in the United States yet. If Uruguay had found themselves in that same position, how would you have gone about finding that common ground, or what are the things that you would have suggested to start doing to get there in the political sense, to get to where Uruguay is now?
This is perhaps the most important question. What we are having in our Western, Eastern democracies is that we have to vote every 4 to 5 years, and then changes can be completely disruptive from one government to the other. And this is the worst we can have for the energy system, the worst we can have. So what we did was try to be all together in order to understand what was the best for the country. And this is something I can speak with everyone in the United States. I can accept that some people can even think that climate change is just a Chinese invention. But even though what I can say, okay, let's take it for granted, it's a Chinese invention. But even though, if you have some new energy, which is your energy because it's domestic energy, domestic resources, which are cheapest, no doubt about it, there's no doubt about it. When you have to subsidize fossil fuels, in the United States, you're subsidizing fossil fuel every year for $35 billion investment in subsidies for fossil fuels. So you can stop subsidizing this dying industry and just live in free competition of the new economy. If you're creating millions of jobs, if you're independizing yourself, you don't have any more inflation if there is a tragic war in other countries. So this is the best for your constituency, no matter where they vote. So this is the point that we have to understand, all together, all politicians, is that nowadays the new technology is ready, the new renewable-based economy is ready, and this is the best for us. If we don't do something rapidly, what is going to happen is that you're going to be in the past. Chinese, nowadays, they're investing half of the total amount that is invested worldwide in renewables. Take this. Only 5 years ago, only 5% of the patents related to batteries, EVs, and all the new technologies related to the energy transition, only 5% of the patents 5 years ago were coming from China. Nowadays, 75% of the new patents are coming from China. So if you're staying in the coal, in a few years, you will be in the past. The future, the other countries are running. They have already understood that the new economy is ready. And when you're waking up, you realize that it will be too late. So this is what I'm worried, because we have to understand rapidly that the new economy is ready. And this is the way we can discuss it all together. I can give you some not an advice, I don't like to give advice, but just share my experience. When we began discussing with other different parties in my country, and I was leading this discussion, I would say, okay, don't talk about next year or not even next 5 years. Let's talk about 2050, where we should be in 2050. And this discussion is much simpler, because when you're talking about 2050, you're not trying to think and what we will win or lose, because you are winning or losing in 1 year, 2 years. This is not more than 5 years. These are the political times. When we are talking about 2050, you don't see each other there. So it's simpler to agree on 2050. And then when we agree on 2050, we say, okay, so where will we be? What should we be in 2040? And when should we be in 2030? And so what should we do now? So this way of trying to build consensus are crucial, and they're more and more crucial for democracy, because what is going on in the United States is going on in many other countries in Europe right now, and is going on in many other countries in Latin America. It's happened not just in Africa, but mainly in many countries in Asia. So this is the big discussion. How are we going to see each other in this 21st century in 10, 30, 40 years from now? And then what should we do now? This is the question.
Excellent answer. Thanks so much. And we got to leave it right there. We're out of time. Give it up big one more time for Dr. Ramón Méndez Galain. Excellent presentation. Thank you so much for being here. Much appreciated.
Thank you.